Hola and buenos dias, GnGs. My name is Trekkw2ks. Welcome to Weekend Crypto, brought to you here on the Gentleman Crypto Network. If you don't know, again, I'm Trekkw2ks, and the basic idea of what I do here is covering the news events that happen over the weekend. So that's from a Friday to a Sunday. Sometimes things is popping, sometimes things just aren't really that interesting. Generally speaking, if you're a price talk person, most of the time this news is not that interesting, honestly, especially with what's been going on lately. But what I try to do is gather stories and try to figure out, like, how does this work as event-driven news that relates to, is this giving us a trend, an indicator, or is it confirming a pattern as it's ongoing, or is it confirming the end of a pattern? And so I got a couple of different stories going on here, and I hope that something gets your brain clicking, or gets you to ask questions. Some of the stuff is arguably not good news, and then some of the stuff is like, okay, this is what's going on, and it might be good news. I don't know how you're operating in the space, so let me proceed that with, I'm not a CPA, I'm not your lawyer, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm just some guy who's been in the space for a minute, and I've seen some things, King and Zay have seen some things, we've also experienced some stuff in this space that at this point, we've been around for a while, so we kind of see the patterns of behavior and activity, right? So anywho, before I jump into the story, as I do like to say, thank you for the people who are tapping in. Thank you for the people who are jumping in on the lives in the morning, because this does come out on a Monday at 08. Oh, and if you're in the celebratory thing of 4th of July, hopefully you have a safe and good company 4th of July, right? I don't know what y'all are doing. I know what I'm doing. And, it isn't as exciting. But nonetheless, thank y'all for still checking in with these episodes. And thank you for the comments, and thank you for the DMs and stuff. I do appreciate. So let me jump into this, right? First story here is Binance suffers fresh blow as it loses its key banking partner. So Binance confirms the news and stated that it would be changing its banking provider for euro deposits and withdrawals through the single euro payment or area. So basically what happens is the partner was PaySafe Payment Solutions. Let me go down a little bit more here. And I don't know, man, this just looks like a whole bunch of collusion is happening on the back end to definitely mess with Binance in particular. And considering that there are a number of other international exchanges that do not get the same level of scrutiny, that operate in a number of the same markets as Binance, but they're not getting, this level of shoulder tap the way Binance is getting it. So it's really interesting. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. Like, if they can make it through the rough of this, the comeback game is going to be real. If they make it through this and it doesn't end up shutting down because of the tactics being used, arguably, by the U.S. to get other jurisdictions to start doing things to mess with their business. That's at the end of the day, bottom line of what's going on right now. So let me get through this next couple of things here. So PaySafe Payment Solutions, the European banking partner of Binance, announced on Thursday that it will no longer offer its embedded wallet solution to the U.S. crypto exchange across the European economic area starting September 25th. So this means if you're across the pond, if you're over there in Europe, you got a couple of months before this whole situation changes up. Other thing to note, they said the U.S. cryptocurrency exchange. So this is not Binance International. This is the American sub group, or the American part of Binance. So this is Binance US, which I find kind of confusing how this article does it. They just use Binance interchangeably, and not even interchangeably, because there's no part in here that says Binance US. The only reason you know that it's specifically talking about the US arm of the company is because of this first line right here. But everything else after that is just like, which one are we talking about? I'm gonna jump down to another line here. So basically, Coin Intelligence took snippets of Reuters' original article about this, because they were the ones to get the email from PaySafe. So this is a derivative of the original article. So there's some things that got mixed up around compared to what's in the original article, as well as what's probably in the original email. Jumping down to another line here. Where is it? This line right here. So, in recent development, Binance and its U.S. affiliates reached an agreement with the Securities and Exchange Commission, aka the SEC, to ensure the customer assets in the United States remain within the country until the resolution of the comprehensive lawsuit filed by the regulatory agent. So, let me just throw this out to y'all to remember. Remember when we were talking, okay, those of you who were with me or in the community space back in the days, okay? We would always make this joke about like, well, if I go from this country to that country, show me where the crypto is held at. Because basically how crypto works is if you have an internet connection, you have access anywhere you go. This particular situation that's going on with Binance, if the SEC wins this case and this particular condition right here about how they have to keep it, quote, within the US, it is going to set a very, very big precedent for how people project and think crypto is how it operates. If it's a digital thing in the name of, as long as you have internet connection or some kind of digital connection, because for those who don't know, you can technically do a transaction if you understand how to do the math side of it on paper. Not to mention, you can also get dummy phones, which are basically like Ericsson's, the old Ericsson phones, to be able to send and receive crypto, certain cryptos, not every crypto. You can't get them to do everything in relation to cryptocurrencies, but you can make basic transactions. The point being here is, if you are able to move without man-made borders and have access to this financial asset, to this thing called cryptocurrencies, this argument here about how it has to stay, quote, within the US, what does that mean? And then arguably, I'm gonna say, like, I understand Binance is in a legal bind of a situation, but them not pushing back on that to be like, yo, like, we can't make that argument to you on the end of, unless it's on a physical cold storage wallet, what does that mean? And then how about even on that, if you have it on a physical cold storage wallet, guess what? If the wallet gets destroyed, but you still have the seed phrase, you're just going to go set it up on another one, wherever it is you are. The point I'm trying to make with this particular situation, ladies and gentlemen, is this case is going to have a very big ripple effect that will change people's understanding of the actual technicals of how this thing actually works. And that's what I don't like about what's going on in this. But I don't want to beat the horse because I don't want to be here too long tonight. I'm going to jump into this next story. I'm just saying, if you're over in Europe, have this on your radar. As we are here in the States, this should be on your radar, because this is going to have an effect that will ripple throughout all of the centralized exchanges. And I'm going to say this is also going to affect the decentralized exchanges. So jump into this next story here. South Korea approves crypto bill to protect investors, goes into effect in 1 year. This is another thing, too, that goes along the lines of, like, we're putting up borders, quote, we're enforcing borders in the digital space because we're doing this under the thing of jurisdiction, right? The way this article is broken down, like their format was actually different. I wasn't expecting this. First time actually coming across the forecast news. Yeah, this was a different thing, the way they did it. Again, I should say to folks, link for this will be in the description, so you can definitely run through this to, double check and do your own due diligence in trying to understand or cross-reference any of this information that I present. I strongly and highly recommend that you cross-reference the information that I present on here, because I might have missed something. I might have gotten it way, way wrong as far as how I interpret these different events and scenarios, right? And I'm not the Mr. Know-It-All, so just throwing that out there too. So let me get into a couple of these things here. So the bill, a agglomeration of 19 proposals from lawmakers, requires crypto service providers to ring-fence users' assets and deposits, to have insurance, to hold a portion of reserves in offline cold wallets in case of hacks or system failures, and to maintain records of all transactions. There's a couple of things that, yes, sound good, right? So, for example, don't have it all online. Do have the whole thing of like cold wallets and stuff like that. Have the reserves to be able to back what is being a part of your circulation, right? The insurance thing, that arguably takes away from the whole thing of like economic sovereignty, because the insurance thing then gets you arguably into that whole, what do I call it? Derivative accountability, where you're like blaming it off on the next person. And there's a story that I have. that will relate to insurance and how insurance doesn't always cover what people think. It's a JPMorgan story. But before I get to that, right, this other thing to think about too, about to ring fence users' assets. What does that mean exactly to ring fence it? Are we saying that that's the whole geolock thing? Are we saying that excuse me, you might have to do some extra steps to like access your stuff? Like I reported, was it last week, about the bank in excuse me, France, or was that the UK, that's like, hey, you got to give us 24-hour notice, and depending on what you say you need, you know, what was that, 2,000 plus pounds. If you say anything above that, like, depending on what you say, you might have to provide documentation, and we can still tell you no. Like, think about that. This is falling near within that. Like, these are the things, the little steps that work towards those kind of policy changes in the banking institutions and facilities at the ground level, right? It's like, oh, well, you know, the regulators came up with this policy, and well, we have to implement it and follow it. Like, we can't do anything. Our hands are tied. Yet these are the systems that, ironically enough, we keep building and putting back in place, even though we see how they can be problematic. That's the crazy part to me. Anywho, jumping into this next one, the bill defines virtual assets as electronic representations of an economic value that can be traded or transferred electronically. The bill excludes the central bank digital currency, aka CBDCs, BKA, what I call the blue dogs, right? Under the Bank of Korea, the country's central bank. So they're basically like, hey, we want to make sure that we separate out, legally speaking, what CBDCs are going to end up being and what we're talking about with the quote cryptocurrency, aka virtual asset stuff, right? That's at least how it looks right now. Other thing is, what's the other one? The bill defines legislation. So this part in the line here, this first part of the line. So the legislation, however, does give the Bank of Korea the right to request data from cryptocurrency platforms. That almost sounds like, in my mind, it can lead to some level of front running when it comes to the exchanges. That's what it sounds like in my mind. As well as, hey, we see that they're creating X amount, they're generating X amount of volume. We need to figure out how to tap into that market, which is eventually what it's going to lead to. Again, just looking at certain events that are happening, this is what's going on over in the East. South Korea, Japan have definitely been on the forefront of the regulatory stuff, but it is also a different social dynamics for how their people have accepted the regulatory implementation compared to what we find here in the West, compared to what we find in places like Nigeria or Central African Republic, compared to what we find in places like Costa Rica or Venezuela or Brazil, like different social dynamics. And so they've been able to get this far as it is. What was the other thing? Oh, this was another line too that I thought was stupid. I'm just reading it just because, and then I'm gonna jump into this next thing. So where are we at? In an interview with Forecast in May, I'm not even going to mess with dude's name, Suk Jin of the ruling People's Power Party, Power Party's Digital Asset Special Committee member, Jesus Christ, said the proposed bill will establish the legal rights of virtual assets users and create a safer, more reliable market for cryptocurrencies. That's straight fucking cap virtual signaling bullshit right there. It's them going, we need to figure out a better way to make the business work so that we can tax the people and tax the business. That's cap as a motherfucker right there. I'm just saying that right there. All right, but let me cut and jump onto this next story because I'm gonna get worked up. This next joint here is with the block, and for folks who use come on, man, what are we doing? QuickNode. Basically, QuickNode is a development platform for being able to build, and it's more of a Ethereum kind of eco-friendly building platform. So basically, they're adding in XRP support into the platform, and so for the devs in the house, for the people who are the tinkerers, for the people who are the founders who like to come up with things to, hey, let's integrate this, let's integrate that, let's find new ways to be able to support the type of user base and customers we have, this might be that. This just might be that. Now, I don't know all of the ins and outs of XRP, but I'm going to say that if this just happened, so here's the other thing that I find funny about this. This company, QuickNode, is a U.S. company. So if XRP loses their case flat out with the SEC, like, what then? How does it work? Like, do y'all then pull back support after you encourage people to build on you know what I'm saying, build using their platform. I don't know. But nonetheless, damn, pardon me. Okay, Jesus, I'm trying to like get through this right now. My throat is feeling a little dry. The short of it is just this. Like I said, it's nothing really eye-catching in this article, at least to me. But also, no, I'm not the biggest XRP fan. If you do find this interesting, you do want to look into it a little bit more. Again, the link for this will be in the description. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say on this one, y'all. I'm sorry. And plus, it was like a really short article. And I don't really want to go crazy on time because I want to also get into this next story here related to everyone's favorite, JPMorgan. So, remember I told you the thing about what Daily Hodl has been doing, which is they've been just like scouring the news and then finding like financial related stories and then throwing it in their feed. This one I think is relevant on the end of... And they don't do a very good job at all in regards to cross-referencing it and like what you should think about when it comes to TradeFi, which is traditional finance, and where that world of DeFi or CeFi, DeFi, or just cryptocurrencies in general, like where this thing crosses and what a story like this means to folks who want to operate in this space. So here's the basic idea. JPMorgan Chase refuses to reimburse customer after Imposter walks into bank with fake ID and walks out with 30,000 of their money. Okay, so jumping down. All right, so here it is. Right, a guy named Justin Lee says he lost 30,000 after a man with false identification and an incorrect social security number walked into a Chase branch and convinced the bank to hand the money over. Reported this was on the Atlanta TV, so I guess this happened down in ATL, right? Now, most people would be like, well, you know, what about FDIC? The FDIC is there. Yes, the FDIC is a department, a federal department that deals with if the bank goes under or is dealing with a bank run situation. Guess what? This doesn't count as that. This is someone walked in with no gun and with false identification and a bad social security number and was able to pull out 30K, which then means the bank is going to have to start changing the process. Okay, here's a scenario for you. Remember I said the story about how the bank over in London did the 24-hour notice thing. This could be an argument for how a US-based bank will say to its users, you got to give us a 24-hour notice before you come in, because now this is a new security feature. It takes one event to bring it to your attention. It takes two events for you to figure out how to react to it. By the third time something like this happens again, or something in a similar thing, you're going to see more banks be like, oh, well, we now have to add a new type of security layer for physical withdrawals. Just throwing that out there to y'all. This could be the perfect situation to make something like that happen. Let me also give a little bit of caveat to it in that this person basically went through arbitration and the other processes that they were supposed to go through as, you know, being a depositor in the JPMorgan bank, and they basically weren't making them whole. That's the bottom line of it, because the bank is like, well, it doesn't fall on the FDIC, so we can't get you money that way, and we're not about to just give you 30 racks. Like, no, sir, that's not going to happen. Here's the other irony part of it. Let me jump down to this other line down here. Where are you at? No. Where are you? Here. So, the agency does, and this is about the FDIC thing. So the agency does not protect anyone due to loss by fraud or theft. So think about this. If your bank gets held up and someone's able to steal like $100 million out of there, $500 million out of there, how does the bank deal with that loss of money and making the depositors whole? This is part of the reason on the security side why banks don't look to hold physical money like that anymore. But nonetheless, it still is a question of who do you go to? It turns out it's not the FDIC, right? But there is the Electronic Fund Transfer Act and Regulation E are designed to assist people who lose money in certain types of wire scams. But apparently, this doesn't count as a wire scam. However, the regulation doesn't cover customers who authorize scammers to move money out of their account. So this is like one of those like situations of, this is something that was big in the UK on the elderly population. What scammers were doing was they was getting older people to go to their banks, and then they would get them to buy Bitcoin by doing like wire transfers out, or they would do the hard cash pull of the money out and then go to an ATM and then put it in that way and send it to an address. Over here in the States, what they're saying is like, we don't have anything that protects you if you did something along that lines. So if a scammer was able to get you to authorize sending it to it, guess what? We don't protect you. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is, as far as this person is concerned, they didn't do anything wrong. So the question is, where does the liability land at? And another thing to point out, like I said, one of the things I notice about the way the Daily Hodl covers these kind of stories, they don't give you the correlation of how it connects to crypto, or like, well, could this have any implementation or implication within cryptocurrencies exchanges, within the ATM network stuff? And I'm telling you, I can see this leading to a situation in regards to traditional banking here in the States, where they start adding in new withdrawal policies. Because again, because bank robbery, believe it or not, bank robberies are still a thing. ATM thefts are still a thing. In 2023, those are still real things in this world. The point being is, how I look at this story is, this is just one of the little blips on the radar. But when you get enough blips happening, it attracts your attention, and the traditional banking is going to have to react to this. In my mind, I see more scrutiny and anti-theft practices of where it's going to be harder for you to get your money out of the financial institution. That's at least how I'm looking at it. I could be way wrong. I don't know. Time will tell what happens, right? So jumping into this next story. So shout outs to Jesse, because he was always trying to fight the good fight over at Kraken, right? But this situation happened. So Kraken ordered by court to disclose user data to IRS for tax compliance. I'm going to tell y'all straight off the bat, here's what they're doing. They're basically comparing the exchange records to their records. And if y'all forgot, I think it was like 2 weeks back, or it might have been last week's story that I said, there was an IRS Supreme Court case that said the IRS, if you are under investigation, can go to another party, demand the financial records from that second party of a third party that is somehow connected to you. And you get no notice about it, that you are under investigation, and neither does the other person. And the financial institution has no obligation to let you know that that is going on. That just happened within the last 30 days. Then this story comes out? Come on now, y'all. Like, and there's another part that goes to this too. Of, if you look at the bigger picture of, depending on who you're listening to, recession's already happening. Government at every level is trying to figure out ways to get money out of companies and people's pockets. That's the bottom line of that part of it. And then you have the other part of like capital flight. So let me get into it a little bit more so you'll see kind of where I'm going. So the United States District Court of Northern District of California has ordered crypto exchange Kraken to turn over account and transaction information to the IRS. The agency said it needed the information to determine if any exchange users had underreported their taxes. Like I said, the only way that makes sense is unless you already have a set list of like, oh, this is what John has, this is what Susan has. Okay, bet. I need to compare it to something else. So there's probably a couple thousand people. Like, what is the user base? I don't know, honestly, what the user base of Kraken is. Because, like, at this point, we all know Kraken is still, it's there as an exchange. But it ain't popping like Kraken in 2017. It ain't popping like Kraken in 2016. You know what I'm saying? It's there, but it ain't popping like back then. So what is the user base of Kraken? And don't forget, Coinbase already sells the information to the government, and they give them a service, a software service that works to like cross-reference all of the stuff. Plus you got Chain Analysis that sells services to the government, right? So at the end of the day, all they really doing is they just trying to confirm the numbers that they've calculated out to be like, oh, okay, of the population of people who we think underreported based on how we're looking at all of the public addresses from the exchanges, from the wallets, whether they're a hot wallet, a cold wallet, whatever, we need to compare it to the exchanges that have X amount of source data that we don't have. That's all they're doing right here. Yeah, let me jump down. I'm sorry, I didn't read the line from the screen that you guys are seeing, but this is the line here. So again, like the northern district court of California said this. I'm not even, the other part to note. So this is about if you did more than 20K within the calendar year. So the calendar year means January 1st to December 30th or December 31st, whatever that is, right? The end of the year. Basically, if you did over 20K, they want to know. Now, understand this too. That is just the initial number to start off with. It doesn't mean that they're not going to look for lower amounts. And then the other part to note on this, and it's actually further down here, is, wait, did I pass it? Right here. So it says they were already in, they were already in beef with Kraken for the investigation for tax obligations of users conducted cryptocurrency transaction between 2016 to 2020. So that's already a time period right there. So so think about it this way. Let's say you was like doing your thing 2016 and 17, and then 2018 came in, and you was like, all right, yo, like the market's doing what it's doing. I'm done. I'm gonna just sit back and let this stuff like build on its own. They're still going to look to go back to what was going on in your 2016 and 17 account activities. And then when you put in the late fees on top of that, and then if you actually underreported to the official record because you signed off saying, oh, it was only this, like, yeah, they gonna be coming. I'm not saying expect a knock, but it could be it will more than likely be a letter. And then you know what else is really crappy about this? And I imagine Kraken is in a very hard place, right? So think about it this way. For the folks who don't necessarily pay attention like that to how much activity they've been having, I would hope if Kraken does, at the end of the day, they're going to give off the info because it's a business, right? I would hope they would at least let the folks know, like, yo, we gave over your stuff. At some point, you're going to get a letter. At some point, somebody from the IRS is going to contact you. So you might want to go find that CPA and that lawyer now. Because some people, they're not even aware how far over 20K they are. Some people might be just about to touch 20K. But it's like, well, if you don't do nothing for the rest of the year, you might be short by like $500, but you should be okay. That's assuming this isn't a dragnet. Kind of thing where they ask for one thing, but then they got to give them a whole treasure trove of other stuff, because they also talk about like the raw metadata stuff in here, which, it's a whole other thing onto itself. This is another part of the article I wanted to actually read out too. Judge Joseph Sparrow, who presided over the case, seems to have dismissed the IRS's attempt to obtain employment information and source of wealth from Kraken. The judge outright denied several of the IRS requests. I wish they would have actually listed all of what the requests were, because think about this, right? And here's my thought process on this. If y'all wouldn't have wanted all of the information, all of the ins and outs and this and that of the users, like, I understand the argument of, well, it makes for better product, service, and offer. But now look what that did. And that just sets you up for this situation. If you never collected the information from the get-go, you would have never been in court to begin with. Well, no, you'd have probably still been in court for some other stuff. But you wouldn't have been in court for this situation, which is, I would say, kudos to Shapeshift and Eric for his stance on, you know what? We just gonna back up and we not gonna collect no more of the user stuff. Like, we done. Like, that's it. We're gonna move the company in a very different direction, in a more decentralized format where we're not collecting information like that. And so this way, we don't even end up in no kind of, yo, you got to give us X, Y, and Z conversations with any federal or local agency. Same thing. Shout outs to Paul and them over at Edge Wallet, because they on the same thing too. Like, yes, there's certain features and functions that you could use that might require a little bit more identifying information, some KYC stuff, but they tell you off the break, like, yo, that's not us. That's gonna be the third party that you connect with to give them your information. We don't want no information, homie. We don't want nothing. At the end of the day, we try to do the least amount of information or collection on you as possible. Why? Because then you end up in cases like this. And cases like this cost companies money, which at the end of the day takes away from them being able to better support the customers. That's at least how I look at it. But anywho, what was the other? There was no other on that. Last story is here. So last week I heard a number of people mentioning about how FedNow was gonna add in the payment part of the system this weekend. It was a whole July 1st, and then I went through the FedNow website. This is the Federal Reserve website, and this is the section for FedNow. And I'm trying to find where is this announcement of the FedNow system working to where money is actually transferring from institution to institution, because the system as it was set up in the first part. Now, and understand, to be clear, a couple of things. One, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your financial advisor, just somebody who actually is reading what the Federal Reserve website is saying about FedNow and how it's supposed to function. So, down the road, there is the monetary element to FedNow as an overall system. But what it was initially set up as is basically a messaging system that's like, hey, party A has money that came from party B. And then you have the part of the intermediaries as far as like, I'm the vendor, and then I have a customer who bought something from me. We have two different banking institutions. I'm sending the message through the FedNow app that says, as the vendor, I have sent the invoice to the user, the customer. The customer then pays the invoice, and that's going to where it's two different banking institutions, and the messages are being sent back and forth. But eventually, the institutions have to do an exchange of value between of what my invoice as the vendor was sent to the customer. Initially, there was no monetary element within the FedNow system, but from what everybody was talking about, it's like, oh, it's supposed to happen, beginning of July. This is the latest article that's up right now on FedNow, announcing organizations certified, and it's actually not doing it, showing the full title of this blog post. This is actually a blog post on their thing, because I was going up and down the website and couldn't find the exact thing of it. But nonetheless, it's announcing organizations certified as ready for FedNow service. And so they provide a whole list of banks that are here. Where are you at? The 41 list. So some of you might know some of these banks, like First Source Bank, like Atlanta Community Bankers Bank, Avidia Bank, Bankers Bank of the West, BYN Mellon, that's a big name bank, Bryant Bank, Buffalo Federal Bank, Community Bankers, Customers Cooperative Union, Credit Union, Corporate America Credit Union. So here's the thing that got me when I was actually going through this. Oh, there's everybody's favorite, JPMorgan. There are a lot of credit unions on this list. There's actually even an article with Star One Credit Union. They did a thing for like whoever their CEO or their like president person is right now. This lady, something with the last name Gupta. But here's the thing that gets me about this. They're moving along on their roadmap. And the link for this will be in the description. I want to get through this. Here's some of the service providers. Finestra, that is a very big player in the space on the back end. Finestra, they're not American based. I forget where they're out of though. But the point being is like, this is happening, and now the question is, how are folks going to deal with this implementation, especially if you're not, how do I say this? If you don't want to be in this part of it, honestly, you really got to start doing your own due diligence and research to figure out, like, what are you willing to give up as the comforts and conveniences of your life as it currently is for your lifestyle, where when this really comes online in full swing, you have the ability and the option to go, you know what? I'm just going to walk away. You know what? I'm not going to interact with that part of it. You know what? I have enough value in X number of other things that work where I don't need to deal with this part of the system because I don't like the conditions that come with this system. And I promise you, there is going to be conditions that come with the FedNow system. It will not be apparent to the everyday average Joe person until you're already so invested in it. Like, there was something, I was listening to George Gammon, and he gave a hell of a scenario about how bank runs, once FedNow or like whatever the system is going to be, like let's say 15 years down the road, what the financial institutions would do is, let's say you figured out that there was going to be a situation in the economy or in the financial sector, and you went to your bank and then you pulled out your funds, right? So you pull them out, and let's say you start buying stuff, or you try to pull it out and like hold it in fiat cash, or you move it to another institution that isn't going to have the same issue as the facility that you're banking with. He made the comparison of, even if you pulled it out as one of the early people, the way that the FedNow system would work, and when the CBDC integration part of it, or whatever kind of thing they come up with to integrate the monetary value part of it comes into play, it won't matter if you're the first 100 people or the last 2,000 people to pull out of that banking system. Because the way that the money can be programmed, you would still take the same financial haircut whether you were first, middle, or last. That's the part of the conversation, that's the part of the conditions that no one's really talking about as they push these conveniences and these improvements of instant settlement and payment and blah, blah, blah. Just saying, just throwing it out there, something to think about. I'm not saying this is a tomorrow thing. I just wanted to throw this out there to y'all, that this list came out on, what was that, Friday? Thursday? And I thought it was worth bringing up because this is just a part of the roadmap. And as more things happen within the economy, as more things happen within, your local city and state situations, like as more things happen globally, like this is just going to grow and be integrated more and more into your life. And you're not going to realize it until it's like, oh, snap. When did this happen? And like I said, there's a number of credit unions on here. More than I think 300 to 500 credit unions closed during C19. There's only, I think, under 5,000, or I might be really high on the number, but there's not as many credit unions as there are traditional banking institutions in the U.S. And a number of credit unions closed during C19. So I'm amazed that there's this many of them on this list, one. And then two, if they're all connected into the same system as this is, what is even the purpose of having a credit union versus a regional bank versus a state bank versus a multi-conglomerate bank? Like, what's even the point of that if they're all operating out of this one kind of ledger setup? Just throwing that out there. I'm going to leave that there as it is. Again, link for this will be in the description, so you can definitely look this up. And I really do encourage people, go to this website and like really look through the website and see what they're saying in broad daylight. So when things start really popping, I don't want to hear nobody say, oh man, but I never knew, or I had no idea, or nobody told us. I promise you, we've been here from day one trying to tell folks about this FedNow thing, about what the Federal Reserve is doing, about the OFAC reports from 2021. Like, they literally tell you what they're going to do. That's the part that always amazes me. But anywho, I'm done with beating that horse. Again, I'm Trekkw2ks. Oh, closeouts. Last thing to say before the closeout. I do this on the Monday morning, 08 it comes out. I try to make those live convos with y'all. I appreciate those who made it all the way to the end, and I look to tap in with y'all. Other thing is the metaverse is the other side. We catching up on these episodes, and we having these crazy like conversations where I hear them now, and I'm just like, damn, man. When you look at what's going on in the metaverse space right now, it's crazy that like I said, we've been having these conversations like months back. We just did the joint this weekend about the documentary We Met in Virtual Reality, which is a documentary that was done by the dude named John Hunting. And he basically did a whole interview process with different people in VR chat. And it's the whole thing inside VR chat, and how during C19, people had the desire and the urge to still connect and meet. And like, it just goes to the whole thing about the human connection. Like, we find ways to make it happen. But anywho, if you're interested in that, definitely check it out here on the Gentleman of Crypto YouTube channel. Again, it's called Metaverse is the Other Side. We do the repeats on the weekend, on Saturday, about 12-ish. But we do the live recordings on Thursdays at 8 p.m. East Coast time. But other than that, let me just say, have a productive over busy day. If it's not a productive day, at least have it be that you're in a safe place, in a safe space, and with good company. And from one human to the other, that's the best that I can wish for y'all. And again, if you are somebody who's doing the whole 4th of July thing, I'm just hoping that, you know, you're in good company and you're enjoying yourself for whatever it is you do. All right, y'all. 1.